guys, and thank you for this opportunity. Let me start with a personal account. I was 10 years old when the first free elections took place in Hungary in 1990. And I remember accompanying my parents to vote. I was, of course, unable to vote, but they were voting, and usually my parents are very easygoing and very casual folks. And I remember this tenseness, but in a solemn way. They were solemn, almost ceremonial, when they went to the polling booth. And then I remember when I was 14 years old in 1994, again accompanying my parents to vote, and they were still solemn, but in a less solemn mood than in 1990. And I remember 1998, this heard free elections in Hungary, but they were not solemn at all, but they were pissed off with the current administration. So the point I wanted to make is that transition to democracy is not an easy task, and it lasts long, and it's not a sprint, but rather a marathon. And even now, after 20 years of this systemic change, we see some signs that there is no foolproof guarantee. Even the EU membership is not a foolproof guarantee in the case of any country of backtracking on democracy or having a linear development into a pluralistic society. Let me have a few remarks on the Arab Spring then, from a Central and Eastern European viewpoint, to what extent our experiences can be transformed or used in the Arab countries. And then let me just make some proposals or points how to proceed or what we can do together with the United States, the European Union and the United States on strengthening the civil society in the Arab countries. Of course, needless to say, all countries have unique characteristics, especially in the Middle East, so many of the experience we have in Central and Eastern Europe cannot be easily transposed to these countries. But still, I believe that there are some experience we had that can be used as lessons learned in these societies. One experience we had is that after the systemic change in 1989, all the attention was on politics and on institutions and on human rights, which are, of course, essential and very important in terms of building a democracy. But in the meantime, we actually neglected the civil side of the whole equation, the civil society. If you look at the Copenhagen criteria, which is the accession criteria to the European Union, the political criteria are entirely made up of political, institutional human rights, rule of law, legalistic elements, and don't even mention civil society as such. So there was a considerable underinvestment in civil society in Central and Eastern Europe. If you look at the country reports, again, in the European Union accession process, hardly ever civil society was mentioned. And partly because of that, and partly because of this paternalistic heritage we have in Central and Eastern Europe, that many citizens expect the state to take care of them, civil society remain, up to this very day, very weak in most of the Central and Eastern European states. As the Hungarian historian István Bibó put it, these small circles of freedom, civil society organizations, have been completely, or for most of the time, invaded or intruded by the political sphere. You can hardly find, even today, an independent civil society organization in Hungary. It's developing now, but it's still in its infancy. It's still habitual for the political sphere, for political parties to try to at least occupy a doctors' association or a farmers' interest promotion group, because they feel that these associations or civil society organizations are just means to further their political goals. So this is, I think, quite detrimental to the overall state of democracy. So that results in us having still very few independent actors. Many of the trade unions are also discredited because of the reasons, and the civil sphere overall, they have a lack of legitimacy and they lack attractiveness in the eyes of the society as such. And of course, needless to say, this whole thing ends up in a serious dysfunctionality as democracy is concerned, and also results in weaker accountability of government and an underperformance of the political sphere because of the weakness of civil society. A second experience, which is I think also relevant in the context of the Arab Springs, is the economic one, which is that we had this painful experience of transformation from a nominally egalitarian society to a completely divided society. We have the cities like Budapest, which you can hardly differentiate from Vienna or other major Western European cities. Cosmopolitan, rich, modern, urban. But at the same time, we have the rural, especially eastern part of the country, and this is also true to Poland and other countries, which you can almost find, I can say, third world conditions in certain villages. So there is this enormous divide in the society which evolved in the last 20 years. Rural poverty, we also have the pauperization of the lower middle classes, which is also quite detrimental to the overall state of democracy. And these are, of course, needless to say, huge shocks to the entire system and a hotbed for populism and extremism in the future. And I believe this is relevant because this is also a daunting challenge for the Arab world. Inequalities already being much larger than they used to be in Central and Eastern Europe when the systemic change happened. So I think this is something to watch. What can we do as European Union, as member states, and as the United States? I think the political and civil empowerment is crucial. Institution building, democracy, rule of law. Mentioning the Copenhagen criteria, I don't say that it's not important. Of course, free elections, political parties, freedom of speech, assembly, these things should come first. But at the same time, we should not neglect the civil society part of the equation. In terms of politics, I believe what is important, given the sensitivities in the region of external intrusion or external influence, I think it's important that the Western governments stay out of micromanaging the political situations and leave the task of organizing parties or help nurturing new parties to those organizations which are political but not governmental. I mean the NDI here in the United States, or the IRI, or the soon-to-be newly established European Endowment for Democracy, or the European umbrella organizations for parties like the Party of European Socialists or the European People's Party. They should be the ones who go in and help these parties to be more, not the governments. And on the NGOs, I think or the civil society, what is very important is that it should again not be the government, but to try to hook these new civil society organizations in these countries with those civil society organizations in the West, in the United States, in Europe, which are up and running and successful, and to help these so-called civil twinning operations from European sources and United States sources. So in that way, they could learn directly from the source. They could see the good examples, how these organizations work in the West, and then apply these experiences in their own country. Another very important thing which we could do as the United States and Europe is to increase mobility. This is also part of the proposals the European Commission and the High Representative Catherine Ashton made several days ago. She outlined a proposal based around three core principles, one being money, second being market access, and the third being mobility. Mobility in the sense that there are these enormous layer of young people in the Arab countries who are hungry for experience, who are hungry to travel, hungry for mobility. I think we should give them the opportunity to at least spend some time in the United States or Europe. We could do that easily by expanding the Erasmus program, which is up and running and successful in the European Union, by expanding the Erasmus Mundus program, the Tempus program, the Socrates program. But not only university students should be addressed, but also by vocational training and all these kind of programs. Not students, but young professionals or workers even who are looking for a job or already have a job but looking for experience in the West. Of course, this also presumes at least visa facilitation in the longer term, hopefully also visa liberalization in the case of these countries. Of course, this is a long way to go given the current state of mind in many of the European countries and the fears of immigration. Finally, a word on technology. I agree with Kurt on the importance of technology. Although, on the other hand, I think we should not necessarily overemphasize it's very important, and it's a vehicle, it's a tool to carry out the message. But you still need the people, you still need the organizations behind the message. It's still very important to get together. It makes them easier to get together, but you still need the leadership, and you still need the participation of the people to make good use of technology. And finally, just a concluding remark on transatlantic cooperation. I'm happy to see that so far the United States and the European Union and the member states are in unison in addressing these problems. The way of thinking in Washington and in Brussels is very much the same. The proposals coming out from the State Department and from the European Commission are very encouraging to my mind. Of course, it all boils down to actual financing, which is a crucial issue, whether we will have enough money to spend on these projects. And I think this is a good start, but